Thanks for joining the March 22nd Volta TSD call. So we're going to have a continuation of some discussion we had previously, sort of as lead up to the April meeting. And so Sean is going to be giving some a continuation sort of the discussion that we began a couple of weeks ago with the service profile and some architecture proposals for an evolution of Volta. And with that, I think I'll hand it over to Sean after the usual announcement. They are recording this, and so once the meeting is concluded, we'll plan to post it to the Volta playlist. And I think with that, Sean, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Julie. So this presentation is more of I just want to have a discussion around the current architecture and some potential issues with migrating towards a more technology agnostic Volta core. So let me show the first slide. So this slide is basically just showing the current architecture around business service flow creation. We have the flow decomposer and the XPON handler that deals with the technology-specific aspects of XGS-PON, allocating TCONs and ALLOC IDs and GEMPORT IDs, etc. So if we just look at the current architecture, oh, by the way, can everyone see just one screen at this point? Is that what everyone see? Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Good. So basically, this is a few bullet points here around what's currently going on in the current architecture from my understanding anyway. So currently, XPON handler basically manages the PON TC layer attribute allocations for service flows, or there's a you can manually set those values that you want to use. So basically, the current architecture basically depends on the centralized allocation from the XPON handler, from the perspective that the OLT and the ONU parts of the system have to have the same ALLOC IDs and GEMPORT IDs that are used on the PON itself. So the XPON handler gives the OLT side the TCONs, ALLOC IDs, and GEMPORT IDs, and also gives it to the ONU as well. But these are done independently. The ONU uses, the OMCI generation of the MEs from the ONU depends on getting the correct, GEMPORT IDs and TCON IDs and ALLOC IDs to be used. The flow decomposer part separates out the, again, the OLT specific match action rules and the ONU specific match action rules. And again, so the OLT and ONU are just configured separately and they're viewed as separate devices, not as an ONU that subtends from an OLT. So the Volta abstraction, sorry, go ahead.
Sean, so the flow decomposer, I think I just recently realized this. So to separate out the OLT and ONT configuration or specific match action rules. So that framework was established even before the XPON config got introduced, right?
I would assume so. I mean, I wasn't around at that time, but it seems like that would be the evolution.
Yes, it was.
That's been there from the beginning.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And I don't see that. I'm not saying there's an issue with the flow decomposer part of it. I think because it's a, it's a packet frame level type operation, basically just tying together the ONU match action rules and the OLT side of things. I don't think that's an issue. It's just I'm just pointing out that's also a part of viewing the ONU and OLT as separate devices here.
Right.
And now, so basically, the Volta abstraction basically is managing the service flows for the ONU and the OLT independently, right? So it forces the core to basically to know the internal details of how the OLT and the ONU are connected. So in an access technology specific way, because I'm configuring the ONU independently, the OLT independently, But on the PON, they have to match up, right? There has to be an alignment between the fundamental TC layer attributes that are used for every service. And this slide basically just kind of highlights just a couple of, I guess, architectural issues. I think the first architectural issue highlighted is the fact that the XPON handler is managing those TC layer attributes. And I think that's more the fundamental issue. I think the flow decomposer part of it, it's just highlighting this again, managing the OLT and ONU as separate devices. But I don't think it's not really a blocker issue for removing access technology specifics from Volta core. I was just interested in understanding the historical rationale. Yeah. Sure, go ahead.
So look, so you're saying there's an architectural issue with XPON handler. I guess my response would be, I think there's an architectural issue if you're assuming that we don't want access technology specifics in the core.
Yes, exactly.
Sure,
yeah.
I'm not sure we've established that. Sean, have you established that's even more fundamental? I totally agree with you that if we don't want access technology details in the core, then we have an architectural problem with XPON handler. It was put in there and it's in the core. But we may have a philosophical issue among the community of whether we want that in the core or not. I mean, it isn't. Sarisha's not on, I don't think, but she was making a point that it is an abstraction, hardware abstraction layer. So where does the abstraction take place? I guess the argument is to push all of that to the device adapters. But I don't want to derail your conversation at all, but I hate for us to completely jump to the conclusion that we do not want architecture, or we don't want access technology in the core if we haven't settled on that yet.
Yeah, I think the first, and you're right, the first step is is there agreement that we want there to be an OpenFlow abstraction for the Volta core itself? If it's not just an OpenFlow abstraction, then that opens the door to technology specific things, right? So I guess the fundamental assumption, I guess originally, in my understanding, was that the idea was it was going to be an OpenFlow abstraction with no technology specific parts in there to modify that view of the abstraction. I guess
what's Sean's view on this? Just, by the way, it's still Hurst. I joined without the normal pin, so I may look like a guest. I apologize. What is Sean's view on that, or what's the? I just heard that we've got a problem if philosophically we see things differently. What is the current view of how it should be as far as documented or the plan? I guess that's what I'm questioning.
The Volta, it is the fundamental principle of the Volta when we get started with Tom Montrose and Ali is the Volta is the OpenFlow, the hardware abstraction for OpenFlow switch. So one thing is the reason why if the hardware dependency type of the configuration got involved so much deep in the detail of the Volta core, then every time when we introduce a new technology, the whole framework is going to get reinvented again and again and again, right? So I think that's totally against the idea about what is SDN NFV is about. So the Volta is a device, hardware abstraction device for SDN environment. So if we follow that principle, we want to make sure all the hardware device related I would say the device configuration should be pulled out as a microservices associated to the Volta. But so what I think, Bill, what we're saying is we're not going to support any hardware specific information. The approach is we want to make the Volta core as hardware device technology agnostic, and all the hardware device dependency will be connect to the Volta core like microservices. So that is the principle.
I comprehend that. Did that clarify whether or not this is an issue to the people who just raised the issue a second ago?
I think when we introduced XPON config, it's got introduced into the core. If initially got introduced into as a microservices, then it will not be an issue. But right now it's part of the Volta core. So that's where the confusion now getting more involved. So I guess the effort right now we're trying to establish to maintain the integrity and the principle of the Volta as the SDN as the hardware environment for SDN environment. In the meantime, what am I trying? I'm speaking a sentence too long. I forgot what I just said. But at the same time, we want to be able to multiple technologies, right? So right now the XPON got intertwined into the Volta core. It is making Volta off track what the fundamental principle is.
So that's a good clarification, Sean. So what you're saying is we've gotten off track with the principle. I don't know if that was Brian Davis or whoever was asking the question, and then the person who was raising the issue that if it is meant to be intertwined, then we got an issue. I think that's what I heard. If it's meant to be intertwined, we got an issue. If it's not meant to be intertwined, we don't have an issue. Am I summarizing what I heard or not?
Yeah, I think that's correct. This is Philip, Bill.
Okay. Thanks, Philip.
Yeah, Philip from Adrian. So I guess I just want to make sure that we are firm on the direction fundamentally, even at the highest level of whether we want that technology abstracted, completely eliminated from the core, the technology awareness, or not. It sounds like Sean is saying, I'm not sure I would say Sean is 100% convicted. It sounds like, Sean, you were relaying what some of the predecessors said from Tom Anschutz and perhaps some of the original architects of Volta. So are we stating matter-of-factly that we do not want access technology specifics in the core so we can move on from that, or are we still debating that?
Can I interject something real quick?
Yeah.
Right now, actually, we're showing that the flow decomposer is, device agent local handler talks to the flow decomposer, and there's actually the logical device agent on top of that, which is derived from the flow decomposer. So, there is a place of separation where we might be able to customize more device technology, access technology specific information in the local device agent of proper type. And second is I can see XPON and OpenOMCI and also the device agents not being in the core container, but they might be running, at least the XPON and others might be running it as a separate container if needed at the Volta core level of the picture. Does that make any sense?
Well, I guess the discussions in the previous meeting were more around anything that's I guess technology device specific is kind of either in the adapter layer or as a microservice, right? Because just trying to completely isolate the core code from the technology specifics. I think that would be the desired approach.
Yeah. And one question here. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, question would be also, I mean, certainly from a philosophical perspective, right? You could say that it doesn't belong in the core, but the point would be, well, when would you actually do a migration? Because it sounds like, I don't necessarily think that there's some sort of big urgency, right? The whole thing started as Volta, OLT being, the part of it, but you could simply say, long term, TBD when that might be. It might be desirable to move this out, but future technologies, GFast, whatever that might be, let's make those into adapters and not, depends on the amount of time it would take to do that, and is this good enough to do an implementation now, given what we know?
Yeah, and I think that's, if we want to look at that as a kind of a stepwise, I mean, Sean Ying should be probably talking, I guess, but if you want to look at this as a stepwise approach to how we do it, maybe the first step to kind of removing the access technology specific part of it is kind of just to kind of work around, what's there currently. And then later on, you can maybe migrate.
Why wouldn't we fix it now? Why would we perpetuate it or leave it there? We don't have launchable stuff as we sit, so why not fix it?
I think the way, because the way it's intertwined together, so it's really hard to fix it at this point. So I think.
What is the urgency? What is the urgency that would have you continue on with it out of alignment with the direction? What's the urgency that says I got to take it as is?
Because we do have existing POC happening with other service providers. If we change that too dramatically, then it will impact other service providers' schedule. There is ONF is working on a different approach right now, so two models can coexist. So I think I think the way to this is let's introduce a new model. And have option, just like if the people want to go still maintain the current framework, at least the current framework is still working while we're introducing the new model. So I think that's the once the new model in place.
I agree with that. I agree with that, Sean. I'm perfectly fine with that. My question is though, should we start pursuing the new model and the fix sooner than later, because there's already a perception of heaviness in this thing.
No, Bill, that's what this discussion and proposal is about right now, right? So the new model right now is the working in progress. I think ONF has a pretty good plan, but they're still in the internal proof of concept step. And by the way, before, who was the previous gentleman was speaking? I think the caller 01.
Maybe it's me, Sean. I told you I called in.
No, it's not you.
Are you talking about me? Am I caller one?
Yeah.
This is Dave Pratt. I thought it was going to link to my login.
Your phone doesn't sound like your voice. Okay, good. Okay. So Sean, can you continue?
Well, yeah. I apologize. I'd like to add one thing, Sean Ying. This is important. I think we need to recognize that there's something else out there, and that is the BBF and WT384 and Cloud CO, and then the BAA part of that. I think we need to probably recognize that. We haven't talked about it, but they're developing a competitor to Volta, simply put. So we've got that competition to deal with as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if I'm saying anything I shouldn't be saying, but it's a reality. And they are absolutely going to be putting technology specifics in their core from what I've seen so far. So we're making a major decision here. I just want to make sure everyone's aware that the strategic direction here, that this is important because it could create a differentiator between the two approaches, and it could help one and hurt the other. And so it's just something we need to think about really carefully, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think originally the idea was that they wanted to have a choice, right? To provide a choice. I mean, the Volta is basically based on this OpenFlow abstraction. The BBF model is based upon a netconf-yang model, right? I mean, there is no OpenFlow in the BBA architecture.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
I was at the a BBF meeting where it was stated explicitly that OpenFlow would not be used.
Oh, well, okay. From what I've seen, it looked like it was, but you may be right. Well, that's very different. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are some ambiguous statements in some of the slide decks I've seen, but it's pretty emphatic at the BBF meetings. But, okay. So there is a choice. So there is a difference here. I guess we could decide whether, you know, Volta is going to be supporting, you know, both, you know, OpenFlow and netconf-yang versus the BAA model that doesn't have OpenFlow.
Right, and I believe that in our last meeting, AT&T and DT both stated that a netconf northbound interface was required. It's in the documents I've seen, so that's another thing we have to think about.
Yeah, but that doesn't really affect this discussion, I don't think, right? Because you still have netconf-yang access via, say, a microservice or some other location, right? I mean, this is just basically saying, hey, we have an issue in terms of removing access technology specific information from the core, right? And then how do we deal with the fact that we'd like to have the core be just a pure OpenFlow abstraction as much as possible, and move that access technology specifics to either an external microservice or into the adapter itself, or, you know, we need to have some discussions around that, I guess.
Sure.
So if I just want to continue on with the slides a little bit here. So this was, you know, taking a step from you know, this picture of the current model, and saying, well, if we wanted to move towards the service profile model where basically all the technology specific templates for the services are held in a service profile, and say the OLT is responsible for allocating you know, TCON, alloc IDs, gem ports, ONU IDs. In that case, you could kind of essentially just bypass the export part of this. That's where it's the if you, well, there's two steps here. So the first step is you don't bypass export handlers. It does the same thing as it normally does, right? So basically, it creates the, you know, channel groups, partitions, pairs, you know, ANIs, TCONs, gem ports, VENets, etc. Everything that it currently does, right? And that's passed. That information is passed down to the adapters, and that actually ties the flows together, right? So, so there is a way to do this stepwise. So basically, you leave the expon configuration as is, and you can add in the service profile handler to provide, you know, all the additional details that the expon handler currently doesn't support, and we have no netconf way to set any of these parameters. So that's one step, right? So and here it kind of just basically goes through, lists the different changes basically. So so we can have you know, service profile creation. OpenFlow is adding a reference to a flow table that references a service profile. The adapters use a service profile ID to go and get the service profile from some kind of service profile manager. Expon doesn't change; it still uses the TC layer attribute management, and the ONU and OLT basically applies the TC layer attributes from Expon to the service profiles that it gets associated with the flow. So that's one option. Any comments on that in this particular option?
Could you explain just a little bit more what you mean by the XPON handler getting the TC layer provisioning from the service profile? Is that what you're saying?
No. So the XPON handler, I'm just saying the XPON handler stays as is, right? So there is no change to the core current as is as far as the XPON is concerned. It's responsible for generating the TCON alloc IDs, Gemport IDs in the way it currently does.
Okay.
And then basically through the OpenFlow, there's an additional flow table ID that is essentially the reference to a service profile. Okay. So this is basically this is a way to basically add the additional provisioning for a service, number of Gemports, the scheduling policies, all the things that XPON handler currently doesn't handle. You need to basically introduce WT3.
The things you went over. The things you went over last.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So basically, it's a way to support that without changing anything besides adding this, service profile handler plus adding meters to OpenFlow, right?
Yep. Okay.
So that would be one way to do it without affecting essentially the way that the system works currently, right? So I can still go and do what I did before, but now I can get more information about the service basically. So another step, again, this is just some thoughts. If we could basically move the XPON handler as a microservice, and also have the service profile manager as a microservice if we wanted to as well. As another way of doing it. Or we can move have like a PON resource manager in the OLT adapter as well, and a service instance manager. So kind of getting a little bit into the future here. I mean, there's a bunch of issues we need to deal with down the road that maybe we don't need to think about or deal with initially, like type B protection, NG-PON2. There's additional requirements around the TC layer attributes and how they're used between different PONs, potentially different OLTs, and their synchronization between the two. But that's more of a future thing. For right now, I guess it's okay to have an OLT adapter in the adapter layer allocate those TC layer attributes because they don't need to be shared anywhere. Except between the OLT and the ONU. So there still needs to be a way to tell the ONU what the alloc ID and the port IDs are for any given particular service. So that's pretty much what kind of I wanted to talk about today was can we agree on the current model for the abstraction of the Volta core? Is it going to be purely an OpenFlow abstraction where we try and remove any access-specific technologies? What are the issues with trying to do that? And so, the initial kind of blocker is this basically, the ONU and the OLT are managed independently, and so something needs to tie them together as far as the TC layer parameters. Right, and currently that's the XPON handler. And so I think these are issues we probably need to discuss in the lockdown meeting in more detail. But
okay, Sean, you said that currently is the XPON handler tied the ONU and OLT on the TC layer stuff together, but in the service profile proposal, what will be used to tie them together? Can you explain that part again?
So you still need the TC layer parameters need to be shared between the ONU and the OLT adapter. It's just a matter of where they get them from.
Okay.
So and who allocates those values, right? Currently it's XPON. There's no reason why the OLT itself couldn't allocate those values currently, or it could be in some kind of microservice that's managing.
Autonomously? Do you mean when you say there's no reason the OLT can't do it? Do you mean autonomously?
Yes.
Without specification? Okay.
Yeah. Ultimately, down the road when you get to NG2, there needs to be either an implementation of the ICTP protocol or some external wavelength mobility manager that allocates these things. But I think that's an issue that needs to be solved independent of whether XPON is doing it or not, because the PON ports may be in different pods. I mean, they may be geographically distributed, so you still need a way of synchronizing the TC layer parameters independent of XPON. XPON handles pod local allocations.
So which slide is going to be the coexist? So that this is the one will be the coexist model, right?
So this would be a way of introducing service profiles on top of XPON. So basically, this is showing basically I can add the service profile model without deprecating XPON. We still use that for the TCON and ALC ID and GEM port ID allocations that get passed down to both OLT and the ONU, along with the OpenFlow configuration. The OpenFlow config references the service profile.
And the service profile handler, maybe we have asked this before, the service profile and handler will be part of, will be inside the core?
That's a proposal here, yeah. And this the service profiles themselves. This is just opaque data that gets passed down to the adapters.
Okay. And so when we're introducing, let's say, another technology, then will the service profile handler need to be updated?
Well, it would need new profiles, but that's opaque to the core, so it should be able to be just added as a new profile.
Can I get clarity from you? This is Bill Hurst. Is the service profile in this example the VENet configurations of kind of like the policing shaping bit rates of the VENet, or are you talking something different than that?
No, the service profile defines a template for the service. So it defines the TCON and the number of gems.
I get all that. I'm down at the bottom level. I get the gems and all that are relevant to the thing. So the bottom level, I guess what I'm asking is if I define this service here, and we're talking really just OpenFlow, would these ENet things, so even if, I'll make it a simple example. Node 1 has 16 ports, Node 2 has 32 ports, Node 3 has different. So your gems are different, but is that VENet potentially identical across multiple profiles if you're just trying to turn up 25, 50, 100, a gig?
So just to be clear, this hierarchy of objects here is basically showing what basically XPON handler is configuring. This isn't what the service profile is dealing with. So the service profile is essentially dealing with how a service looks on any given uni. So I can use a service profile X that, let's say, it looks like a TCON plus 4 gems and whatever scheduling and
Yeah, you answered my question. So if I've got a uni that should be identical across 4 technologies, I can reuse a profile.
Well, not across technology, right? As long as the service profile is technology specific in that it talks, in this case, it talks about TCONs and GEMs, right?
Okay.
So
okay.
So it would be able to use it across GPON, XGPON, NGPON2. It wouldn't be able to use it for EPON, for instance, right? It would need.
Thank you for the clarity.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah, and as far as the bandwidth are concerned, the upstream and downstream bandwidth profiles are given by the OpenFlow using the meter model.
Okay.
And then there's a translation from in the upstream. There's a translation from the meter model into the PON scheduling.
And
okay.
Sorry if Sean, I going to say, Chip, will this affecting the OpenOMCI framework you're developing? I think I asked this probably 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I don't think so, but we'll need to, the service profile, it will need to talk to OpenOMCI for the PON case, because like getting the entity IDs for the TCONs and all that. So I think it may, but I think there's not extra work I don't see.
Yeah, I think at the top level where you derive the OMCI MEs, that's where the change is, right? So now instead of getting it from XPON handler and its configuration, you get it from the service profile. Yeah. And some of the identities like the ALEC ID and port IDs would need to come from whoever's managing those resources.
Are those resources managed or inventoried in this or not? So for example, is GEM ID inventoried and the next available in this solution, or are you expecting it somewhere else?
Well, they should be, if you think, asking if they should be available.
No, my question is if you were sitting there looking at, I'll say GEM ID port or device ONU device ID, I kind of equate them similar, or my question is are those, because the OMCI needs to have that information, where is the GEM IDs being kind of the next available being determined in this flow?
Well, so as it stands right now, either the XPON handler is managing that, or the user is specifying those explicitly, or the idea is that if we move that into the OLT adapter, then the OLT adapter would understand the specific OLT, like if it's Nokia or Ciena or whichever company or EdgeCore, it knows the resources available for that particular OLT and would manage the allocation of the GEMs and TCONs based on that the OLT's need.
Okay. You see that in the OLT adapter? Okay, thank you.
And Bill, I don't believe, is that correct? The TCON, the ID itself, the value of IDs should be transparent for the operation, right? It's only the traffic management, the traffic setting, then that's what we care of. The GEMPO ID value, I don't think there will be any value for the operation. Julie, do you think
unless I missed my guess, the GEM port ID is the only thing that I would understand to assign the service attributes for a customer on and set their ONU accordingly and their residential gateways accordingly. So maybe I'm missing it, but I thought the GEM port is particularly important in 802.1x, and that would be how you would identify potentially what specific services a given subscriber should be provisioned based on understanding those relationships. So I might be off base.
Right. I think in AT&T's case, yes, so we have 4 GEM port mapped into 1 TCON, right? And each GEM port will have different .1p, the PBIT setting mapping into the gem port. But what so yes, we know we need 4 gem port per TCON, but the gem port ID, that part I don't know whether the image.
Theoretically, with the service abstraction, you wouldn't really need to know the value. You just need to know you have 4, right? I mean,
right. Yeah, you want the priorities, you want how many services, and then you don't need to know the gem port ID value.
Right. So I think that's internal to the system. We don't really, on the operation point of view, I don't think we need to manage that. As long as the traffic can be mapped correctly to 4 different gem ports and then map into the same TCON. So I may be wrong. That's something we definitely.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm mixing up services at a user-specific level, and you guys are talking at a class-based level. So I've got more homework to do.
No.
No, I think I'm wrong. I got more homework to figure out.
Okay. I think there's definitely some inventory. I think that's actually how to inventory the association between ONT and OOT and PON. That is a topic we don't really touch too often. So I think that's
yeah, you're right. So and the VLAN. So the VLAN on the northbound interface. So those are the kinds of things I'm trying to understand, is how that correlation, where that correlation is known in an auto discovery methodology. So I was just wondering who's maintaining those mappings between the network interface VLANs that are user specific and the gem IDs that are, I believe, user specific. So maybe I'm mixing things up.
Yeah, so I guess OpenFlow kind of defines the relationship between the match and action rules, right? So basically, it's going to match, in the case of AT&T, it's going to match priority tag traffic on the uni, and then map that traffic to different gems based on the defined mapping of which gem supports which PBITs, right? And then the scheduling model between gems in the upstream direction. But the VLAN as it is exposed on the northbound interface on the OLT is again specified in that OpenFlow in the OpenFlow rules.
But I certainly since Nokia is I think Jerry is here, but the Srisha is not. But I certainly I think we like to maintain the principle of this, and I think one of the big advantages for this framework is we can introduce more and more white box solution. So this is definitely, for the service provider, very interested in the white box solution. Volta is playing a very important role on that. One thing I do encourage challenges of these proposals, and I'm looking at Atran and Nokia for the brainstorming challenges. And one thing is the TIBIT. We have Paul here on the table. Paul, since TIBIT has involved with the original Volta development, so I don't know with this proposal. I don't know whether you have, or on the behalf of the TIBIT, whether since TIBIT is a total different animal than a traditional white box solution, then I'm very interested to hear TIBIT's position or comment regarding to this proposal.
Well, I think one of the things I saw on one of the slides that we went by was the PON resource manager being part of the OLT, and I think that's an important concept, and I think that was the original intent of Volta when it was started, years ago. I feel like the whole XPON manager has really gotten away from that. The idea was, the original idea years ago was for it to be, not only, technology agnostic, but also hardware agnostic. And I think that's something important that we have to keep in mind. I really liked that slide where it showed the resource manager as part of the OLT adapter. I think that was the original concept.
Good. But any concern?
Well, no, not with that. I want to think a little bit more about what's being proposed here as far as the service profile handler. It depends where it terminates and where the decisions are made. I don't think, I consider ALEC IDs, GEM IDs, things like that to be very, we want to allow, when I look at other let me phrase it like this, when I look at other technologies like DOCSIS, they really push those things down to a negotiation with the hardware. And I think the same approach should be done here. I think we have to be allowing for, hardware agnostic and technology agnostic. I think it's a mistake not to.
Okay, good. By the way, I do hear Comcast will be part of the lockdown too. So that'll be very interesting.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with some of the cable operators, and I think they're looking for the same thing.
Okay. Cool. So, Sean, back to you.
So was that Paul Gray?
Can I just ask you real quick? This is Brian Davis. I was just sitting over here in Bill's office, and we were kind of we were talking about this yesterday a little bit and trying to just try to figure out the flows a bit on how we would recognize the path of, so an RG comes online, and there's two things that we need to understand. So we want to be able to enable the port where that connection is going to go through. And the idea is that we're passing something up to Radisys, which is our backend. The backend or whatever that's there doesn't really matter. But the idea is that we need to enable the flow, and we need to understand both who the customer is as well as the GEM port that they're on. And so the idea is that at the OLT, is there some type of event or some type of information that can come back, assuming that we understand and we're able to pass the hardware, that's pass an identifier for the hardware upstream to be able to get to the OLT or maybe to Volta at the adapter layer to be able to understand it, where we can marry up both the GEM port that they're on as well as the some type of unique hardware identifier for that, and then we can go back and authenticate that inside of the backend, inside of Radisys. And any other operator could use any other mechanism. I mean, the flow really doesn't matter. I mean, whether we want to standardize the communication between Volta or something further upstream between that and an OSS BSS system doesn't really matter. But is there some type of information, some type of event that we can, or some type of way to be able to query when we're authenticating that downstream device, that we can know what GEM port that it came in on, so we can marry those two things up and then be able to go in our back end and say, yes, this is a subscriber that's allowed, it's a piece of equipment that's allowed, here's the service profile for it, and then we can go down and we can assign that using the flows.
Well, okay, so when an ONU is discovered, right? So at that point, it's going to provide the serial number and registration ID, and then
can I query now? We're going to get that, and so you're saying that does that get passed upstream once that gets terminated?
So I think right now the serial number is the registration ID. I think is not currently, but I think that's something that's being worked on.
Okay. Is that a functional thing? Where does the code for that?
But that's the ONU. So here's the thing. ONU has no intelligence of where they're going to be allocated or assigned. They're just saying, this is who I am, and if you've onboarded them and you look at their X.509 cert and they're legit, you know, AAA at least understands what logic to use to authenticate. My question is, what is the NAS passing up to Radisys to say, I want them authenticated, I want them authenticated on what is the equivalent of slot port, you know, shelf slot port in a normal NAS identifier. So that was what I was questioning earlier, is when you pass up to Radisys for the NAS for AAA, who selected the port in that message? What in here selected the port?
So I think, I mean, you're going to be reporting that it's on a certain port, right? I mean, it was discovered on a certain PON interface and a certain OLT.
Right.
So you know where it is.
But that's the PON interface that's shared across 32, 64, 128.
Right. But if you're able to uniquely identify the ONU, regardless if it's a smart device or not, if you're able to uniquely identify the ONU at the time of install or something like that, and be able to marry that up to the gem port that's inside, so both of those to be able to say, this is the customer, this is the device in the flow, this is the gem port, and you can pat it. So the quick question is can you query once you get that discovery? I mean, the RG would be great, but once you get that discovery,
we'll take it offline.
Can you get the do all that?
I was just going to say the same thing. We've got about 6 minutes left, and we're getting a bit deviated from the initial topic that we have. So can we maybe have you bring that in either to Volta Discuss or in some other means we can put together maybe a use case to bring in and get some responses there? Would that work?
Yeah, Julia, whoever the 802.1x AAA expert is, or who coded that, let's just give me their name. We'll go work with them, or we can bring that. I want to bring that in and review that online.
So let me say real quick. I'm not the expert, but to put you in the area, Bill and Brian, understand that the subscribers, the equipment is registered into ONOS in the net config right now, or can be pushed down. So option 82 takes place for one thing, and so the well, that's the HCP, but so the MAC address of the ONU Uniport gets pushed up for one thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to clarify the gem port reference. So the gem port reference is a reference to a default value that's assigned because of an ONU ID that's assigned to that ONU.
Yeah, it's too big to talk today. Let's just get into the AAA.
All right. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Sean Missett, anything else that we've got about 5 minutes left? Anything else you wanted to bring up with your presentation today?
No, I think we've kind of gone over the highlights, I guess.
Then I'd like to sort of echo what Sean had said. You know, this is, I think, the type of discussion we were looking to have on the architecture as a prelude to April, so that we could get people thinking about it, and that people could bring in pros and cons of different approaches. And also, you know, we have some more time slots. We've only got about I think we have 2 Thursdays left before the lockdown. So we have some agenda items for one of those, but we also talked about extending the Thursday calls if we need to. So if there are other companies or other individuals who would like to bring in additional proposals or comments on the material that's been presented in the discussion so far, please do that and let me know so we can coordinate a time slot for that. So again, we've got, I think, 2 Thursdays left to do that, and we can extend the time slot if we need to. We checked the court calendar last time and it was free after our call. So we'd be able to use that time if needed. So Sean, thank you again for bringing this up. And I think we still have a lot of discussion that needs to happen between the groups prior to the lockdown and then during the lockdown, but hopefully we'll be able to get the framework discussion and direction nailed down by the end of the lockdown. I think, Sean, that's your intent. Sean Yang, is that correct? We're looking to have a final direction out of the April meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
For people who are on the call, please let me know if you are attending the lockdown. We need to provide the name to the front desk in order for you to come in. So please provide the name. And Julie, we also have for the Tuesdays, the Thursdays, we have NTT also on schedule to present their proposal, right?
That one has not been confirmed yet. So
Okay.
that's tentative, but that's tentative on a Tuesday at this point.
Okay.
So we have next Thursday, we have Ken giving some presentations, Ken and Sergio. And then we have potentially another time slot there. We're still going to probably reschedule the OpenOMCI demo when we can find a time slot that works for that. But I think right now our priority is trying to get the architecture discussions and proposals, you know, aired in front of the community so that we can have productive time in April as well. So I think this was a step in that direction. So again, Sean, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for all of the folks who provided comments during the call as well.
Right, it's a much more fun this meeting than last Tuesday.
you don't like the status updates on JIRA issues, and with that, I'll give a reminder to everyone that Sprint 3 is supposed to close at the end of day tomorrow, Friday, and so please keep your issues that you're working on updated in JIRA so we have a correct status of that when we close out the sprint. All right, any last comments from the group before we close for today? All right, I'll go ahead and drop the bridge and stop the recording in a moment. And again, a call for additional contributions or proposals or comments. And if you have something you'd like to present during one of the TST calls, please let me know so we can get you on the schedule. All right, thanks. I'll go ahead and drop the bridge.